right, I'm going to get started. Good morning, everybody. My name is Caroline Higgins. I'm the Director of Guidance at Westwood High School. Thank you for joining us for our Guidance Parent Talk this Friday. This talk is really geared towards parents and guardians of seniors. And I want to thank you all for registering and for providing us with your questions. We tried to tailor this presentation based on the questions we received. One thing that I'd like to note is that if you have questions throughout the course of the presentation, you can just pop them in that Q&A box. Mr. Arelis, who I don't think you can see right now, is actually running the webinar behind the scenes, and he's going to be managing the Q&A. So again, if you have questions, we will take time at the end of our presentation to answer your questions if we didn't cover them during our presentation, and Mr. Arelis will be managing that Q&A. So again, pop your questions into the Q&A box, and Mr. Arelis will read them aloud to me at the end of the seminar. So we are going to go ahead and get started. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about how we are helping your seniors prepare for postgraduate planning. We're going to be talking a little bit about a timeline, the importance of college visits. Many of you had questions about changes during the pandemic. So we'll talk about that because unfortunately we are still in the midst of the pandemic. We're going to talk a little bit about the standardized testing landscape because that underwent some major changes last year, and then what to expect this year. But first, I saw this meme yesterday on the Yale admission blog and it made me laugh. So being honest with the college application process with my parents or locking myself in my room for 40 days. So I think this meme just speaks to the way that some seniors might be feeling right now about the college application process. This can be a tricky time for families. It can also be a really exciting time, but I acknowledge that it can be very stressful as well. And so I know there are lots of conversations that are ongoing in many people's homes that can feel pretty stressful. And while we're really trying to encourage your child to be honest about the college application process, where they're at, what they've done so far, there can also be a tendency to sort of hide from these conversations. So this meme made me laugh, so I hope it made you laugh too. So the first thing we wanted to start off with was just reminding you that the colleges and universities also acknowledge that the pandemic has had a massive impact on students. So when reviewing applications, these admissions deans are taking into account the fact that there are tons of obstacles, tons of challenges that your student has faced. The pandemic has impacted all aspects of our lives, right? There are so many students who had so many plans for things that just never came to fruition, whether it was a summer internship or, whether it was traveling abroad, joining some kind of activity that simply didn't happen. And so there is a statement of guidelines that's been endorsed. Actually, that number is even higher now by college admissions deans, underscoring their commitment to self-care, equity, and meaningful learning. So we just wanted to share this to remind people that things have shifted in the college admission process. And I do feel genuinely that the folks in admission are taking true care and concern with your child's application and are being really thoughtful in the evaluation process and not forgetting all of the challenges that our students have faced in the last couple of years, not limited to, but including having to shift to hybrid learning, which was really challenging for everybody. And again, many people experienced loss, and then also just, like I said, the way it impacted students' abilities to take part in activities. So I just wanted to start off by saying that. So when you all sent us questions, many of you asked about a timeline for seniors. So I'm just going to talk you through where we're at right now. Today, we're actually running our final senior seminar. So we ran a seminar on Monday, on Tuesday, and then there's one during S block. I just sent out an email to all the seniors to catch anyone who hasn't attended yet this week. This seminar was really focused on sort of the nuts and bolts of how to send your materials to college and talking about timelines. We are going to be recording 2 more seminars, and we're going to send them out over the next week and a half. Those seminars are going to be screencasts that talk your child through literally step-by-step instructions for all parts of the application process. And we're going to be starting individual counselor check-ins next week. I know some of us have started already. So we're really hoping to spend a lot of individual time with your child in this process. I know a lot of students are in different places. Some kids are feeling really great where they're at, and some kids are feeling really unsettled. Like, I have no idea what I'm supposed to be doing right now. I feel really behind. And we've reassured them that all of these feelings are normal, and we have worked with all of those things, and we are going to continue to do the same this year. One question that we got was about standardized tests. So this is a question that both parents and students ask us alike. Students are still taking standardized tests at this time, right? So some kids might have registered for an September and October standardized test. So your child can take those tests and still send the scores in time if they're applying early to colleges. You can talk more individually with your child's counselor about how that works. But the September and October standardized tests for early deadlines do tend to still work. So I wanted to just get out there and answer that because a lot of you had asked that question. And then we're going to be starting to send application supporting materials in October. And I'm going to talk shortly about how we do that. So we explain that to your students, and I will explain that to all of you. Okay, so if you're sitting here saying, what should my senior be doing right now? We still want to reiterate that we think that touring colleges is the #1 most important way to build a college list. So that's #1. If your child has not been on college tours or has been on very few, we still really are encouraging that. Working on their common application. So the common application is an application that's accepted by over 1,000 schools in the nation. It's a really nice way for students to not have to duplicate their efforts when they apply to colleges. And so that while there are a few schools that have individual applications that are not in the common application, the common app is accepted at all these places. You fill it out once, then there is a separate section that's individualized by school. So we explain this to students. Pretty much every student should have a common application login because we created those in their junior year seminars. A lot of them don't remember how to log in anymore. They forgot their password. They simply have to reset their password. They'll be able to get in, and it'll roll over any information that they've put in the spring. All of them use their Westwood Gmail address to create their common application. So hopefully that is helpful information for all of you. And then the essay, which can be so intimidating for so many students. All of them should be working on their essays right now. I know some students are done, some students have a draft, some students are just brainstorming right now, but the essay is obviously an important part of the process. The common application has one separate essay, and then many schools have school-specific essays that you can see in the question section that are important as well. So those are things that can be ongoing. And then this is really important, partnering with your guidance counselor to settle on application timelines for each school. So some families have already figured that out. They already know, these are the schools we're applying to for early, regular. I'll explain what that means in a minute. And some people have no idea. They just have like a few schools they think they want to apply to. They don't know when they want to do it. And we're happy to advise your child for their application timelines because that can be complicated and strategic, and it's different for every student. So back to college visits, we just wanted to remind you of a few things. So first of all, we talked about demonstrated interest in our junior college planning night last January. So while not all colleges track demonstrated interest, many do. A reminder of what that is. So essentially, there are ways for colleges to track who's opening emails when they get sent, who's clicking on the links within the emails, who's visiting our campus, who's taken a virtual tour, who's attended a virtual info session or in person. We also have a list of colleges visiting Westwood in person this fall that's listed in Naviance on the homepage. We highly encourage your child to come to those visits because the person who is visiting our school actually reads their application. So it really makes sense for them to come to those visits. And so the whole thing with demonstrated interest is that if your child might be, let's say, on the bubble for admission at a certain institution, if that admission counselor can go back and see, wow, there were a ton of points of interest here. This student opened every email we sent, visited campus, came when we visited your campus, reached out to an admission rep about something. That could be a tipping factor that ends up with an offer of admission, because it shows them that that child is very likely to end up attending because of how much interest and work they've put into that sort of relationship development. Again, not all colleges do this. The super competitive colleges do not need to track demonstrated interest. Also, many of the very large schools don't track demonstrated interest, but lots and lots of schools in the medium to small range do. So we just want to make sure that's on your radar. And again, I know it sounds like I'm going back to this over and over again, but the college visits are super important. I know probably visiting schools all around the country might not be possible for many people, and certainly the colleges understand that. So again, those virtual tours and info sessions. But if it is a local school and it's relatively easy to get to, we really do encourage you and your child to get out to campuses for visits. Why can I not go forward? Here we go. Okay, so this is just a little review about the different types of admission plans that are out there. So early deadlines, there's both early action and early decision. They're very different from each other. So both of them tend to have a November 1st or November 15th deadline. Early action, however, you apply early. You hear back usually around the holidays, and it's not binding, meaning you can still hear back from all the other schools you've applied to, and then you have until May 1st to make your decision. May 1st is the universal deposit deadline for colleges. So many of our students do take advantage of the early action deadlines. Early decision is a little bit different in that it's binding. So you apply early, you can only apply early decision to one school. And then if you are accepted around the holidays, you have to withdraw your applications to all other institutions, and you can't apply anywhere else, right? So it's like a commitment you're making that you're going no matter what. A much smaller number of our students apply early decision, and that is mostly because you have to be super certain that that's your number one school, and financial aid can be tricky with early decisions. So you're not always going to get your package alongside your admission offer. That can come much later. And so you have to be confident that your family can afford to attend that institution no matter what the package looks like. Regular decision is another great option. So those deadlines tend to be like December 1st, January 1st. And what I said in my senior seminars is that regular decision can be really great for students who really need their term one senior grades to boost their overall grade point average. So some of the early action, early decision schools might not necessarily see the term one grades. We will send them all out as soon as possible, as soon as they're available. So that's usually around November 15th, 16th for us. But some schools don't even take them if you're applying early action or early decision. We send them and they don't use them. Some do, some wait. But you're guaranteed if you apply regular decision that those schools will get those grades. And then rolling admission, there's no real deadline. They read the applications as they come in and they churn out decisions relatively quickly afterwards. So again, these application deadlines, counselors typically sit down with students and help them figure out the strategy for different schools. Because for instance, some schools, it is beneficial to apply early. They take more of their class at early. It's a little easier to get in. And some schools, it's the exact opposite. They actually take less early and more regular. Early decision can also be really tricky. It can definitely boost a student's chances of getting into a school, but not necessarily by a huge amount for some of those extremely competitive schools. So again, talk to your child's guidance counselor about the type of admission plan they might want to use for each college they're applying to. I'm sorry, this keeps happening. Okay, so this was a big question. What do we send and how do we send it? So there are basically two ways that things get sent to school. There's the way through Westwood and what families are responsible for. So what Westwood sends is a transcript, meaning a record of your child's grades from their first 3 years of high school. We actually put transcripts in folders so students could see what their transcripts look like currently and what their GPA is currently at the senior seminar. So if your child, hasn't shown you a copy of their transcript or you didn't know they got it, they all have them. So we send their transcripts, and then the counselor and the teacher both submit a letter of recommendation and a teacher form and a counselor form via Naviance. All of these electronic submissions happen via Naviance, okay? And I'll explain in a minute what a student needs to do to activate that process. So this is making me crazy that I can't just move forward. Okay. And then in terms of what you send and how you send it, students and parents, families, let's just say, are responsible for sending their applications directly either from the Common Application or whatever application platform their institution uses. We have no way of tracking that. So sometimes families think that there's a portal that we can look to see if a student has clicked submit. We don't have any way to track that. You are all responsible for tracking those deadlines and submitting on your own. Similarly, SAT or ACT scores are also submitted by families on their own. So that's not something that is listed on a transcript, for instance. It's something that you are all responsible for sending on your own. We generally recommend that you send those out about a month in advance of college deadlines. So, if you are somebody who has a child, let's say, who has one SAT and is taking another one in October, some families say, well, my kid has a November deadline. What do I do? Do I wait to get the score? And there's two schools of thought. You could wait, and then you could do what's called rush sending them. It's more expensive. Or you can take advantage of the 4 free score sends before your child takes the SAT, put in 4 schools that it'll automatically go to, and then you can also put in a few more that you pay for that it'll automatically go to, and it sends the prior scores as well. And just a reminder that colleges super score, meaning they take the highest score from all sittings of a test to put the student in the best possible light in terms of their standardized test scores. So you're responsible for standardized test score sending and application sending, right? So how do we know when to send these things? There's a couple of different forms. And again, I'm going to email this presentation out to all of you. These have hyperlinks. These are all linked on our website as well. But there's a bunch of different things that students have to do to make sure that all these things happen, right? So in terms of the teacher stuff, teachers are, they've all been asked in the spring by students, hypothetically, right? I'm pretty sure all your students did ask their teachers in the spring. And so what happens next is that 1 month in advance of their earliest deadline, so by October 1st, there is a teacher questionnaire. Now let's see if my computer will behave so I can show you. Yes, great. So this questionnaire, the most important thing is actually a checklist at the bottom where they list the college name and the application deadline. So basically every student has access to this. I'm going to email this out again today as a reminder. They make a copy and they share it with their recommender. Some teachers had their own questionnaire that they had students fill out. So if that was the case, they don't have to do this top part. If that wasn't the case, it's just a nice reminder to jog a teacher's memory about why they're writing about a kid. And then, so that's 1 month in advance, right? Once you send something to the teacher, once you send the questionnaire, if you alter your list, it's really important that you make the teacher aware, right? And that happens frequently because it's 1 month in advance of the deadline. Sometimes your child might decide like, oh, I want to add another one, or I want to add more at regular decision. So they just have to make sure they're communicating and that the teacher's aware of that. There's also a step where they request the teacher on Naviance. Most of them, again, did this in the spring, but if they have any questions about how to do that, their counselor can very easily help them with that. So that's how you make sure that the teacher sends your child's letters within the timeline they need. One thing I will say is that some families get a little bit antsy because their child might send their application materials in earlier than the teacher and the counselor. And that's totally fine. You can send your stuff early. And then the supplemental materials can follow, meaning the teacher, the counselor letter, the transcript release form can all follow. There's no, like, the deadline is the deadline. So it's not like the child's application will be read earlier and there will be some benefit or detriment because their supplemental materials followed later. So we just ask you guys to be patient with teachers. I made this comment to my students in their seminars, just as some students wait till the last minute to do things. Sometimes people do that as well here, right? And so, you might have something going out on October 29th, October 30th, people get nervous. Rest assured, it's all going to get there. And really the one deadline that the colleges adhere to and is really important is the application deadline for the student. It's very common for colleges to take time to process the supplementary materials that follow. And so please don't be anxious if that happens. It's very, very normal. And they're very forgiving because sometimes things get, stuck in the internet and don't get there. And we have to call and say, what's going on? And colleges are super understanding about that. The transcript release form is the form that we ask students to fill out to notify us that they're ready for us to send their transcript. So this is a Google form. They fill out one for each school. They let us know the deadline they're using. They let us know the date to send it out by. You're supposed to acknowledge that you know where your student is applying and that you're cool with us sending the transcript out. So that is what activates the transcript and the counselor letter and form. So we've got the teacher stuff, and then we've got the transcript and counselor stuff, which all gets kind of lumped together. And those are due 1 week in advance of the application deadline. And we told students, please do not start filling out this form until October 1st. So if your student submitted their transcript release form already, we are not going to be able to process and send materials until October 1st. We're still finalizing a few things on our end, including our college profile, which is something we send out to show the college world how awesome Westwood is. So October 1st, students can start submitting these transcript release forms. And at the very least, they need to submit these at least a week in advance of their earliest deadline. So again, all of these links rather are on our website, and I'll be emailing them out to all seniors in the afternoon, and I'll be sharing this presentation with you in case you're like, what was that form Ms. Higgins talking about? Common application step-by-step. Many students have questions. There's very specific questions that get asked on the common application, like how many students are in your class and what's your guidance counselor's phone number, and silly things like that. You can find this on this Common App step-by-step guide. So this literally should answer every single question a student has about the Common App. So make sure they know about this. And then finally, this handy dandy college application checklist. So this is what I use when I'm sitting down with all of my students to make sure that they are on track. So this details junior year, summer, senior year, step by step, what a student needs to be doing to make sure they're on track for the college process. Again, this is online. I'll email it to you. They have it. But for me, somebody who needs sort of something visual to hold on to and look through, this is very, very helpful. So I just wanted to make sure you are all aware of this. All right, so that's my checklist. I'm so sorry, friends. I don't know why I'm having so many troubles advancing my slideshow today. Financial aid. Okay, so many people asked about financial aid, and I just wanted to quickly explain the difference between need-based and merit-based financial aid. So need-based financial aid is awarded based on your submission of the FAFSA, the free application for federal student aid, which you can start filling out October 15th. And that is going to be based on different financials that your family sends, right? Merit-based aid is based on your child's grades. So merit-based aid is awarded, there's nothing that you need to do in terms of merit-based aid being awarded. It's just going to be, they get your child's transcripts, they get your child's standardized test scores, and they're able to make a determination about whether your child should be awarded merit-based aid. Most of the very selective schools do not award merit-based aid because so many of the applicants are very competitive students. More of the middle tier schools do award merit-based aid to students. So that's a helpful thing for many Westwood families. We want to make sure that you're all aware that EFC calculators are available on all financial aid websites. That's basically an estimated family contribution. So you can get a general sense of what your family might owe based on a specific school's tuition, room, and board. So I do recommend that because some people are really shocked. They think they might qualify for more financial aid than they do. So any college on their financial aid website, they will have what's called an EFC calculator that can give you an estimate of the numbers you might be expected to pay. And then these are just links. So the FAFSA is that free application for federal student aid that I mentioned. If you want need-based aid, you have to fill that out for every school. You can start this October 15th. The CSS profile is mostly required. It's an additional financial aid form on top of the FAFSA that some private schools require. You do have to pay to submit the CSS profile per school. The FAFSA is free. And there's a list on the CSS profile page of which schools recommend this. It can be confusing because there's not necessarily hard and fast deadlines for financial aid applications in the same way that there are for actually submitting the admission applications. But generally what we say is the sooner a family can submit a financial aid application, the better. Generally, the financial aid letters and awards start to come out end of February, March, and sometimes even into April. And then we did want to draw your attention to MIFA. So MIFA is the Mass Education Financing Authority, and they offer both live and recorded sessions on financial aid. They can even help you fill out your FAFSA. Those are some very overwhelming forms sometimes. So MIFA is a great resource to access. And I want to just put that on people's radar. Okay, Mr. Airlist, if you can hear me, I feel like I skipped the slide about test optional. If you're able to go back to that slide, unless it's ahead of this, there's something going on with my cursor. So I'm not sure if you're able to find this.
Let me see if I can help you out on that one.
Oh, here it is. Yay, I found it. Great. Okay, so I'm sorry, in my troubles advancing the slideshow, these were slides that are important to show. So a lot of questions we got from parents are, is test optional really real? So many schools went test optional during the pandemic and have stayed test optional. We talked to the director of first year admissions at UMass Amherst. His name is Mike Drish. He's a great guy. And he said, no one should take a standardized test for UMass Amherst. We've heard similar things from Boston University, Boston College. Truly standardized testing has become less of an important factor in college admissions, and it is very real. So what that means is students who are not submitting tests are not at any kind of disadvantage in terms of their comparison to their peers who did. If your child does not submit a standardized test, it's not that that admission counselor is going to say, well, that kid's not a good tester, so I guess that's the case. No, it's just not a factor that's used in their evaluation. So a lot of parents say, I don't know if we should include my child's test scores or not. And what I often tell people is it really varies by every school on your child's list. So what we've heard is if a college or university is test optional, the student should include their standardized test scores only if they're within the middle 50% of the SAT or ACT range from the prior year's incoming class scores. You can find all of that data very easily on a college's website. So for instance, if your child is applying to a wide range of schools, it might be that they don't submit their standardized tests to their reaches, but they do to their realistics and safeties, for instance. So this is the advice we give people in terms of including standardized tests. And again, I just want to remind people that there really is no disadvantage if a school is test optional. You do not have to include those standardized tests. And again, happy to have individual conversations about that with anybody. Okay, look, now my cursor is working. So it's all going to be okay. This is the note I wanted to end on. I do think that the college process can spike a lot of anxiety for people, and it really is all going to be okay. We survey our seniors at the end of the college process, and what we found is almost all of our seniors have ended up getting to at least their second choice school, if not their first choice. Many do get into their first choice. And more importantly, your children are going to grow up to be like happy, well-adjusted humans, right? And we're here to help them. And also, college might not be the right path for everyone at this point. Some people might need to take a gap year. Some people might be looking at deferrals. So we just want to remind you that we're here to partner with you. We want you to reach out to us and we're happy to help. We all got into this because we're helpers. We love the college process and we want to be here with you every step of the way. So I just wanted to end on a little bit of a reassuring note because I think this can be a really anxiety producing process for people. And, you know, this is my 13th year doing it, and I've never had anything really disastrous happen with a student before. If we take it step by step, if we partner together, everything really is going to be okay. So thank you for listening. And at this point, Mr. E, do you want to go ahead and share out some of the questions we have? And then is Miss Parker on this?
I think she is here, but it made her a parent when she logged in. So I can jump in and help with all the questioning.
Great. Sounds good. We'll bounce the questions back and forth. So why don't you go ahead and curate those?
Okay. The first question is, if we toured schools last spring and it was still during COVID, should we somehow notify the school that we were there? Are they still looking at this as indicating interest? And if so, how do we do this?
That's a great question. So I'll go ahead, Mr. E.
Yeah. Honestly, the number of schools that track interest kind of varies. There isn't like a specific list of schools. What I would say is you can always access a virtual tour. You can always email an admissions rep. There are just a number of different ways that you can let them or demonstrate interest or show a school that you're interested in them. So what I, oh. So,
for the announcements.
yep.
Please stand for the Pledge of
Hi,
Allegiance.
everybody.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please remain standing for a moment of silence. Thank you. Please be seated. A reminder to teachers, please post your attendance and absence. And a reminder to students, please confirm your S-Block schedule for the day in MyFlex Learning. Picture Day will be held today in the gym. Please refer to the schedule shared with you. It is also posted on the library windows near the main office. Please check for your assigned time. The following institutions will be visiting the guidance office next week. If the visit falls during S-Block, please sign up on MyFlex Learning. Monday, September 20th, Merrimack College during S-Block. Tuesday, September 21st, George Washington University during S-Block. Macalester College during P-Block. Students, if you would like to be part of the live audience during KCT's All-Star visit, be sure to sign up. See the Google form in your email. Also, the Invisalign has still not been claimed. Please come to the main office if you need to pick it up. Thank you. Have a great day.
Sorry about that, everyone.
Sorry, announcements are over.
So yeah, there are a number of different ways for you to demonstrate interest. I would say if you want to let a school know that you had visited, you could always email the admissions rep, or you can always log into any sort of virtual seminar that they are running. You don't necessarily have to remind them that you were there last spring. I think as long as you have a touch point, if the school monitors demonstrated interest, they'll definitely take it into account.
Agree.
Next question. Is there a list of schools that track interest? I kind of mentioned that, but no, there isn't a specific list out there. It really does vary per school. If a college needs another essay, is it also submitted via the Common App?
Yes. So if it is a school that uses the Common application, the supplemental essays will be submitted via the Common App as well, through the question section that's individualized for each school.
Next question is, can I get a list of schools visiting Westwood via email that is not in Naviance? So most of the, or all of the schools that are going to be visiting Westwood will be listed on Naviance. So you'll just need your students' login information and you'll have access to it too. But I'm sure if you email your student's guidance counselor, we can probably take a screenshot of the list and send it to you.
Yep.
Next question is, can you add the colleges that will visit WHS on your Instagram page like you've done in the past?
Ooh, yes, I will write that down. Excellent idea. Okay.
Okay. Do parents have access to Naviance? Do we need to access it via student login? So yes, you will need your students' login information to access Naviance. Can you comment on which schools have non-restrictive versus restrictive EA? For restrictive EA, you cannot apply ED anywhere and can only apply EA to public schools. For non-restrictive EA, can you still apply ED to one school and EA to public schools?
So what I would say is that list is ever changing, and I would partner directly with your child's guidance counselor. I'm sure we can find you a list, but I certainly could not, on the top of my head, name that list.
Well, when will 2021 acceptances and enrolled data be updated in Naviance? We just visited a Westwood freshman student at Dartmouth, and there is no enrolled for Dartmouth for 2021, for example. So we did update Naviance. I believe it was updated as of Monday, but we can definitely double check to make sure that all of our most recent data is reflected on there for families. So we'll definitely take a look at that again.
Yes, we just updated the GPAs, and that should have updated all the data, but doesn't always mean that worked. So thank you for letting us know, and we will double check that. So that should be by end of the day for sure.
Since there is a teacher questionnaire, is there also a guidance questionnaire as the second recommendation comes from guidance?
Sure is. So your child filled out something called the Student Descriptive Questionnaire last spring for us via Naviance. There were about 20 questions that they answered. There are some students who did not do that. The guidance counselors keep a list of names and consistently reach out to make sure we get that questionnaire. There's also a resume that your child filled out. They should update that resume reflecting their summer activities and anything for this fall. We did mention all of these things in our senior seminar, but believe you me, if a guidance counselor is going to write a letter of recommendation and they do not have that information, they will reach out directly to a student and a family and let them know.
Our next question is, where are the Common App step-by-step and college checklists to be found online? So we do have them on the guidance section of the school website. They're also, I believe, hyperlinked in the slideshow presentation, so we can always send that out to you. But if you need the direct links to them, please feel free to reach out to your student's guidance counselor and we'll be happy to forward that to you.
Yes, they should be on the senior page of the guidance website, but I will double check after this if they haven't been updated or if the links aren't working.
We heard that some schools base their room assignments if you get into that school. Sorry, let me rephrase that. It sounds like some schools base their room assignments on when you submit your completed application. Also, with rolling admissions, it seems to make sense that transcripts and teacher recs would be sent as soon as the student submits their Common App. So for that question, we send what's called an initial transcript. And in that initial transcript, it actually lists all the classes that a student is currently taking. And as soon as we get their updated grades, we send an updated transcript to the potential schools that your student will be applying to. So colleges will have that information. They just may not have grades when they first take a look at it. But typically, yes, senior grades, first term senior grades. But typically when we send the initial transcript, it will have everything that they'll need just in terms of setting room assignments for their incoming classes.
I think in Max, I think they might be saying they've heard that like you get better housing if you apply earlier. So if I'm misinterpreting that, what I will say is they certainly wouldn't do anything on when you submitted your application because they don't know whether your child's going to be admitted or not. I do know there are some institutions that if your child deposits earlier, they can sometimes have preference in like the rooming lottery or whatever the situation is, but that's not common if that was what you were asking. And I also agree that if your child has a rolling deadline, it probably does make sense to apply earlier on in the rolling application deadline cycle.
Next question, will you send first term grades or semester grades to colleges when applying regular decision? So yes, we will absolutely send those. Most regular decision deadlines are typically around January 1st. So we update the transcript so they'll be able to see terms 1 and 2 on the transcript.
Correct. And they are not combined as a semester grade. They're separate term by term grades that the colleges can see.
Do I need to fill out the FAFSA for merit aid?
For most colleges, you do not. I will say that the Westwood Community Scholarships, which are the scholarships you hear being announced at graduation, you do need to have filled out the FAFSA if you want your child to be eligible for those scholarships.
Oh, we gotta thank you very much. This is very helpful. So appreciate you taking the time to speak with all of us stressed parents. So that's always fun. What is the recommended number of colleges to apply to? Honestly, I always recommend between 8 and 10 colleges to my students, but to be honest with you, it varies. It really just depends. I have had students apply to more than 10 colleges. The goal at the end of end of the whole process is that you have options that your student is happy with. So my focus is always on making sure you apply to a list of schools where if you get in, you'd be happy to go to any of those schools on the list. So the straight answer is I always say 8 to 10, but it really is going to vary. It depends on the family. It depends on the student. If a student wants to apply to more colleges, they can. If they want to apply to less, they absolutely can. But we just want them to be happy with the colleges that they are applying to. Do you know if, due to kids deferring their first year due to COVID, will that affect the number of enrollments for the students entering in the next application year?
So what we have heard is no. We've asked this question because we were nervous about that ourselves. Like, what if half your class defers and then how will that impact this upcoming senior class? But that did not happen anywhere. It was a much smaller number of deferrals than most universities and colleges anticipated. So what we've been told by numerous schools is this should not have any impact on the upcoming class of 2022's, admission chances.
Some colleges accept additional recommendations. Would a coach's recommendation be on the same timeline as the teacher recommendation? That's a really good question. I would say if you're going to have an outside recommendation, I would have the outside recommender email it to the college as soon as they're done with it. I can't guarantee that an admissions rep will actually take a look at those outside recommendations. But if you do have them, I would say the sooner the person sends it in, the better.
And I'll just jump in and say, we're not huge fans of additional recommendations. What we've heard from colleges is it's very rare that they read them or they find them useful. I know that sounds a little harsh, but people will send all kinds of things, Uncle Bob went to BC, so he wrote a letter, and the employer and the internship supervisor and the coach. And really, they want a snapshot of what the student looks like inside a classroom, which is why the teacher one is very important. And then the counselor one is super important because we give kind of the full picture, activities, character, all around. So what I would say is please hold off on additional letters. And I'm not just saying that for me, I'm saying this because this is what many colleges have said to us, is literally please hold off unless it's like a super unique situation where it's really going to shed additional light on the applicant.
If a child didn't get admitted during EA, will they be considered for regular? Do they need to reapply? So in many cases, it can vary from college to college, but typically students will get rolled over to the regular admissions pool. There are a growing number of colleges that have decided that they will just let families know right up front if their student won't be admitted. But I would say for the vast majority, students will be rolled over to the regular admission.
Right. I don't know if I've ever heard of a college where a student had to reapply for regular decision. It's really you're rejected straight out, which frankly doesn't often happen, or you're rolled over into the regular admission pool and then read within the context of the regular admission applicants, or you're admitted. That too.
Does Naviance have information like what schools Westwood students got into and average GPAs? So yes, when you go into a specific college's profile, we have what's called scattergrams, and you can see like each point on those scattergrams is a Westwood applicant who's applied in the past, I want to say 5 years ish.
3, Mr.
Is
Airless.
it 3? Okay.
Yeah.
So it's in the past 3 years, and you can see how many students have applied, who's gotten in. You can see where their GPAs are, where their test scores are. And then you can also see if they applied early or if they applied regular.
And sometimes they will limit data. So for instance, if it's an institution where like only one student has gotten in the last couple of years, they might not show that data because to protect that kid's identity. But the other issue is that if it's not a school that's frequently applied to by Westwood students, you would have to look, the scattergrams would not have the average GPA and SAT score for a Westwood student. But you can find that on College Board. A ton of places will have that.
How do we recalculate GPA to include only core classes as many schools do so?
So you don't have to worry about that. That's the college admission reps. That's their job, and they will do that for you. They basically if any school does do that, they essentially cross out the electives and then, take the average by the new number of classes per year.
Where is senior seminar today during S block?
It's in the auditorium.
Senior seminar will be in the auditorium during S block today. Okay. Does early action usually increase the chance of getting admitted?
Totally depends on the school. Many schools will share their data set with you in terms of, what's the admission rate for early versus regular. Lots of schools, it does increase the chances. Many of the most selective schools, it does not increase the chances.
Okay. What is the most important thing that a student can do now to improve their application? I would say the most important thing a student can do, honestly, is focus on those first term grades, and then really start
essay, Mr. E, I would say their essay.
Their essay, yeah. You wanna chip away at the application materials. You don't want to wait until the last minute. It can be very, very stressful, and then it can impact you in other domains. So I would say definitely focus on those first term grades and then chip away at the application materials. Really put everything you have into those essays, because the essays are really how admission reps are gonna know who you are. They don't get to see you face to face, but they get a sense of who you are from your writing, from your letters of rec. So I would say just make sure you're putting everything you have into those. Um, is there any other way to be considered for Class Day awards other than FAFSA applications?
So the Westwood Community Scholarships, there are some that are, what's the word? There's no merit tied to them. There's just like a named award. So students do get those. If the family hasn't filled out the FAFSA, there's a small number of Westwood Community Scholarships that don't actually have like a financial implication for the family.
Are there any seminars being offered to help students with their essays this fall? So something that we encourage students to take advantage of is the writing lab that is run by our English department. So when I'm working with my students, I will gladly look over their letters. I typically look for content. I'm pretty good with grammar, but our English teachers are much better than I am. So I always encourage students to go to the writing lab, have an English teacher, or maybe even their current English teacher, ask them to take a look at it and give them some tips.
And we did offer a college essay writing workshop in June that many juniors did attend. And there were also several English classes that tackled the college essay in the spring. So just so parents know that that took place.
Do schools still interview students? Is it important to do those?
So what we've seen, I've had an increasing number of updates from colleges that they're cutting out the interview process. I think that's because of the pandemic and because it's an equity issue, right? Like who can get on campus versus who can't. And so, you know, if an interview is available, go for it. It can really never hurt an applicant, but it's very few schools now that are offering interviews, I would say.
How does rolling admissions work? Do all schools offer this? So typically with rolling admissions, if a school offers, well, the short answer is not all schools offer rolling admissions. But if they do offer it, there's typically a faster turnaround, and you just hear back sooner than you would with an early admission school or a regular admissions deadline school. I've had students apply to a rolling admission school and hear back within like 3 weeks or something like that. So I would just take a look and see if a school you're interested in does have that option.
And for some reason, it tends to be more Southern schools, I've noticed.
Mhm. To clarify the rolling admission, you said that the letters of rec and transcripts will be sent by the deadline of the application, but if the student gets their application in by October 1st and admissions is rolling, they will need their letters and transcripts sent earlier. Is that possible?
Yes, there's a way on the transcript release form to say rolling, but here's the date I want stuff sent by. October 1st, I don't think that, uh, I'm just going to be honest, I don't think that there's going to be a way to have all of the teacher, counselor letter, and transcript materials sent by October 1st, but shortly thereafter, yes, I would say.
Um, and then I think the remaining questions are counselor specific for the most part.
Okay.
So I would, if you did have a question in the Q&A and it wasn't answered in this format, please email your guidance counselor directly and we'll be happy to address that for you.
Great.
Awesome.
Awesome. Thank you all so much for attending today. And again, I just want to remind you, we're here to partner closely with you, and we're happy to help you in any way that we can. We're happy to Zoom you into our meetings with your student. We're happy to give you updates. You know, we're in this together, and we really look forward to working with you. So thank you all so much.